Hi, I'm Gary White, and this is Louisville Now. Welcome back. I'm here with David Kaplan, who is Chief of Staff and General Counsel for the Office of Mayor Craig Greenberg. Thank you for being here with us.
It's great to be here, Gary.
And we're talking about the community commitment, Louisville's consent decree. David, how did we end up where we are now with this Louisville consent decree?
Yeah, absolutely, Gary. So back in the spring of 2023, the Department of Justice, who had been investigating the Louisville Metro Police Department for a couple of years at that point, released a findings report that determined that there was probable cause to believe that the police department was engaging in various acts with regard to use of force, with regard to traffic enforcement, obtaining warrants and service of warrants that they felt violated federal law and the United States Constitution. And the Attorney General came down to Louisville to announce those findings and stood with the mayor. And the mayor embraced those findings and told the community that his goal was to create the best police department in the country, and that he and the police chief were committed to police reform. And we're going to move things forward with the Department of Justice to reach an agreement that would allow Louisville to address those findings. At that point, negotiations commenced with the Department of Justice after somewhat of a delay getting the draft, but after about a 9-month delay, the Department of Justice produced a draft settlement agreement, which is often known as a consent decree, to Louisville Metro. And intensive negotiations commenced at that point to create a more than 200-page consent decree that outlined the long list of things that the Department of Justice wanted to see Louisville Metro and the police department do to address its findings. An agreement was reached with the Department of Justice. That was a strong agreement that had the full support of the mayor. That agreement was filed with the United States District Court here in Louisville, seeking approval of that. And after that agreement was filed and assigned to a judge, the new administration under President Donald Trump, his Department of Justice determined that they were not interested in pursuing that settlement with Louisville Metro and its police department. So at that point, the mayor made the decision that even though the Department of Justice was no longer interested in participating, that his administration would put together a community commitment, which he subtitled Louisville's Consent Decree, in order to accomplish the same key objectives that were outlined in that consent decree. And that is exactly what the mayor did. If you look at the community commitment, you will see that it's a very lengthy document. It's a long list of things that the police department's going to need to do, and it's going to need to verify that there have been improvements with respect to use of force and traffic enforcement and warrants and First Amendment rights in regards to protests, and how folks with behavioral health challenges interact with the police department. And so that commitment was signed by he and the police chief, and now we're moving forward.
And part of this process was finding an independent monitor to help with the process, correct? And
that's absolutely true.
We do have a final pick for that, correct? Can you tell us a little about that organization?
Yeah, sure. Well, from the get-go, I think it's important to point out that the consent decree itself, as all others that I'm aware of, provided for an independent monitor. And the purpose of the independent monitor is to be independent and to monitor the progress that the police department is making in regard to police reform. And so it's a separate voice, it's a trusted reviewer who looks at everything the police department is doing, looks at all the pertinent data, and issues reports and, in effect, scorecards to determine if progress is being made and the pace of the progress. So in this case, even though we don't have a consent decree, we no longer have a court involved, and we don't have the Department of Justice involved, the mayor made the decision that we absolutely still need to have an independent monitor involved to make sure that the process proceeds with full transparency, integrity, and can build the community's trust, because there's a expert, trusted third party that is looking at what the progress that the police department's making. And so after the community commitment was announced, the mayor announced that we would be proceeding with a search for an independent monitoring team that could handle this job. He also asked for money to be put in the budget to pay for the monitoring team, and that was ultimately approved. A request for proposal was issued by Metro government, a broad solicitation for teams and organizations that felt that they had the requisite expertise and qualifications to serve in this important role. Metro government received quite a few applications. I think there were 9 completed responses to the RFP. And so, as outlined in the RFP, it was essentially a 3-stage process. So in stage 1, the scoring team reviewed all of the written applications and determined which ones were the strongest. From that phase, the scoring team identified a number of those organizations and law firms for interviews. Those interviews were conducted, and there were 2 standout organizations, 21st Century Policing and Effective Law Enforcement for All, both of whom had extensive experience with monitorships and police reform. And then in phase 3, there was a final interview in a public forum at the YMCA on Broadway. Mm-hmm. Community members attended that. It was facilitated, and there was a public live streamed interview of the 2 finalist teams who came down to Louisville to present their expertise in person. The scoring team watched that interview, and they each provided final scores for phase 3. And there was also a community survey that was made available for folks who could certify that they had watched the interviews. Those surveys were released, and points were allocated based on the community survey as well. And so there was a total number of points for each team that was a total number of points was awarded to each team based on the 3 phases. And Effective Law Enforcement of All narrowly edged out 21st Century Policing to have the winning proposal.
So now we have the independent monitor who's there, and the next thing is they're going to be working with a community safety commission that is compiled from lots of different individuals in our city. Is that correct?
That's absolutely true, Gary. So one of the things that is different about the community commitment compared with the consent decree is that there is a community safety commission. Mm-hmm. So while the consent decree that was proposed by the Department of Justice and the city to the court provided for regular reports to the general public, it did not provide for a formal body to be created to provide feedback and input to Metro government and the police department, and to receive reports from the independent monitor and to ask questions about those. As well, it's important to note here that the Community Safety Commission will not only be receiving reports and providing feedback on the community commitment, it will also be providing the same kind of feedback on the mayor's crime reduction plan known as Safe Louisville. Mm-hmm. And I think the idea here is that we want to make sure that in Louisville that reducing crime and police reform go hand in hand, that they work together in a holistic way and are not in opposition to each other, which has been one of the criticisms that we've heard of consent decrees, is that there's some kind of a trade-off between being resolute about reducing crime and reforming police departments. And so through the Community Safety Commission, we hope and believe that these 2 goals are going to work together.
That's great. So this is an update on the community commitment, Louisville's consent decree. I've been talking with David Kaplan, who is Chief of Staff and General Counsel for the Office of Mayor Craig Greenberg. And we're going to have more on the Community Safety Commission as well. As that's moving forward, we will have some video from that when it takes place in October here on Metro TV. We're going to be streaming some video from there as well. Thank you for this update. We appreciate it. This has been Gary White for Louisville Now.